You are 21, Egypt, and you are being carried like a bale of flax through your own palace gates, your body bound tight within a coarse-woven carpet that smells of dust and the harbor, and the wool fibers scratch your skin with every jolting step Apollodorus takes. You hear the low murmur of Roman guards, and the distant, drunken shouts of your brother's soldiers celebrating your exile, and you hold your breath against the dust, your heart hammering a frantic rhythm against the tight bindings. The journey through the corridors is an eternity of muffled sound and disorientation, where the familiar scents of cedar oil and incense are now layered with the smell of Roman leather and sweat. And you feel the carpet tilt as Apollodorus navigates a staircase, his grunt of effort vibrating through the wool. You hear a new voice, sharp and Latin, demanding to know what burden he carries, and Apollodorus replies with a calm lie about a gift for the consul, his footsteps never faltering as he moves you deeper into the lion's den. The footsteps stop, and you hear a door close, and the heavy thud of Apollodorus lowering his burden onto stone, followed by a profound silence filled only by the harbor waves and a crackling lamp. The cords are cut, and the coarse fabric loosens, and the world tilts as the carpet unrolls, depositing you onto cool marble in a cloud of dust. You push yourself up, gasping, your vision swimming, until it settles on a pair of worn Roman sandals directly before you. You look up from the sandals, past the hem of a simple white tunic, and meet the gaze of Julius Caesar, who stands perfectly still beside a campaign desk littered with maps, his sharp eyes taking in your disheveled hair and plain tunic with a calm, unnerving intensity that misses nothing. You rise slowly, your joints aching from confinement, and you brush the dust from your arms, a gesture that feels absurdly domestic in this moment. And you see his expression shift from mild curiosity to a flicker of cold amusement at the sheer audacity of your arrival. You stand before him, your breath still ragged from the carpet, and you see him waiting for you to speak first, his silence a weapon as sharp as any gladius. So you draw yourself up to your full height and let the dust settle between you like the first move on a game board, because you are a daughter of the Nile, and you have come to claim what is yours from the man who now holds your city in his hand. He does not speak, and the silence stretches like the desert outside, so you let your eyes travel past him to the window where the torches of your brother's camp flicker on the far shore, a visible threat that you both now share. You take a slow, deliberate breath, the air tasting of lamp oil and old papyrus, and you begin to speak, your voice low and steady, as you tell him you have not come as a fugitive, but as the rightful queen, bringing him a kingdom, if he is wise enough to take it. You watch his eyes, which have not left your face, and you see the amusement harden into calculation as you speak of kingdoms. And he finally moves, a single step that brings him closer, the lamplight catching the fine lines around his eyes as he studies you like a new piece on his map. He asks you why he should risk Rome's peace for a sibling quarrel, his voice a dry, quiet rasp that demands more than just promises, and you know your next words must be perfect. You tell him it is not a quarrel but a war, and that your brother Ptolemy is a boy playing a pharaoh, surrounded by eunuchs and poets who have already driven the treasury into the sand, and whose mobs now chant for Roman blood outside these very walls. You say a stable Egypt, its granaries full and its debts paid, is a pillar for Rome, but a failed state on fire at its doorstep is a problem even his legions cannot easily sweep away. He listens, his gaze drifting to the map on his desk where Egypt is a painted stretch of green along a blue river. And you press your advantage by stepping closer, feeling the heavy signet ring as a secret weight in your clenched palm. And you tell him you know where the grain is buried, and the names of the men who still remember your father's face, which is a currency more valuable than all the gold your brother has already scattered to the mob. He turns from the map back to you, and the silence returns, but it is a different silence now, filled with the unspoken arithmetic of legions and grain shipments, and you can see him weighing the boy king's chaos against your cold ledger of assets. He asks what you propose, and you tell him you propose a treaty between Rome and the rightful pharaoh, a document you will sign with the seal you now produce from your palm, its gold gleaming dully in the lamplight as you place it on his desk beside the painted Nile. He picks up your ring, his fingers testing its weight, and he does not look at the seal, but at you, his eyes measuring the distance between your promise and the mob noise that now seeps through the window like a foul smell. He says a treaty requires two parties who can enforce their terms, and you tell him your terms are simple, your rule for your loyalty, and the loyalty of every man in Egypt who remembers what order looks like, which is a force he currently lacks. He sets the ring down with a soft click, the sound final in the thick air, and he walks to the window to stare at the torches across the harbor, his back to you, as he considers the weight of your words against the rising tide of chaos. You stand perfectly still, the dust from the carpet still clinging to your tunic, and you watch the line of his shoulders, knowing his next sentence will be a verdict on your life and your kingdom. He turns from the window, his face illuminated by the distant, hostile fires, and he tells you that treaties are written on parchment, but enforced with swords, and he asks if you understand the price of the protection you are asking him to buy. You meet his gaze and tell him you understand the price of everything, from a bushel of wheat to a legion's loyalty, and that you are offering him a kingdom that functions, which is the only thing of real value left in this palace. He considers your words, his eyes moving from your face to the signet ring on his desk and back again, and the silence stretches out, thick as the harbor humidity, and broken only by the sputter of an oil lamp and the distant lap of water against stone. You watch him weigh it all, your logic, your brother's incompetence, the value of a functioning port, and you feel the heat of the lamp on your skin, and the grit of carpet dust still in your throat as you wait, your fate balanced on the knife edge of his next breath. The shouts from the courtyard solidify into a single repeated name, yours, chanted by 100 throats in a tone that is not praise, but a demand for blood. And you see Caesar's head tilt slightly as he listens, his expression not of alarm, but of cold assessment, as if measuring the volume and direction of the threat. He looks from you to the window, where the torchlight now dances more wildly, and you understand that your brother has discovered your presence, and the fragile piece of this room is about to shatter. Caesar's eyes lock with yours for a heartbeat that contains the whole of your future, and then he moves, not toward the door, but to the wall where his sword belt hangs, his movements deliberate and unhurried, as the chants of the mob swell against the palace walls like a storm surge. He tells you to remain in this room, his voice a low command that brooks no argument, and then he turns and walks out into the corridor, leaving you alone with the sound of your own heart and the rising tide of chaos he now owns. You are alone in the lamplit room with the echo of his footsteps fading, and the chants from the courtyard swell into a palpable pressure that vibrates the stone beneath your sandals. So you move to the window and press your palm against the sun-warmed limestone sill, feeling the ancient grit and smelling the torch smoke and the sweat of the mob rising on the harbor breeze, and you understand in your bones that Caesar's choice to walk out was not a defense of you, but a claim on everything. You watch from the window as Caesar emerges onto a balcony overlooking the courtyard, his figure stark and solitary against the torchlight, and the mob's chant falters for a moment at the sight of the Roman, their noise dropping to a confused murmur that is more dangerous than their shouting. He does not raise his hands for silence. He simply stands there, letting his presence drain the heat from their rage. And you see the torches waver as men look to one another, their certainty crumbling before his absolute, silent authority. Caesar, voice cuts through the murmuring dark, not loud, but carrying with the clarity of a command given on a battlefield, and he tells the mob that the Queen of Egypt is under the protection of Rome, a statement so simple and final that it hangs in the air like a sentence passed. You watch from the shadows as the torchlight seems to dim around him, the angry faces below turning from rage to confusion, and then to a sullen, simmering fear of the legions his words imply. The silence after his pronouncement is thick and heavy, broken only by the hiss of torches and the shuffle of men who no longer know what to do with their gathered fury. And you watch from the shadows as Caesar remains on the balcony, a statue of Roman will, until the crowd begins to dissolve back into the night like a wave receding from a rock. And he turns and walks back inside, his sandals whispering on the marble, and his eyes find you in the lamplight, holding the unspoken question of what comes next. He closes the door behind him, sealing you both back into the lamplit quiet, and the air feels different now, charged with the pact his words to the mob have just made real. He walks past you to his desk, his movements still measured, and he picks up your signet ring again, holding it in his palm as if weighing the kingdom it represents against the chaos he has just claimed for his own. He looks at you, and his silence now is an invitation for you to speak the next irrevocable term. You meet his gaze across the room, the weight of the ring in his hand, a tangible symbol of the bargain now struck. And you tell him that a queen who must be delivered in a carpet has no illusions about where power truly lies, but that a pharaoh who keeps her word is a more valuable ally than a boy who breaks his. You say you will rule Egypt for Rome and for myself, and the order of those things is the only guarantee you can offer. He closes his fingers around the ring, the gold disappearing into his fist, and he nods once, a gesture that seals your fate and his, and he tells you that you will address your people at dawn, from that same balcony, with him at your side, to make the new reality plain to every man who held a torch tonight. You understand this is not a request, but the first order of your new reign, and you accept it with a slow nod of your own, because the performance of power is its own kind of truth. He hands the ring back to you, his fingers brushing yours, and the metal is warm from his grip as you slip it onto your own finger, feeling the weight of it settle into place as the final seal on your bargain. He turns to the maps on his desk, the lamplight glinting off the worn papyrus, and his voice drops into a low, practical register as he speaks of obligations and consequences, of what Rome will need and what Egypt must now provide. And you listen, knowing every word is a chain you have willingly clasped. He speaks of the future now, his voice low and steady as he outlines what must be done. and you watch his hand move across the map on the desk, his finger tracing invisible lines of grain and obligation from your harbor to his. The shouting from the courtyard is a memory, replaced by this new and heavier silence filled with the terms of your survival, and you understand the throne you have just reclaimed is now a ledger, and every promise he extracts is a stone in the foundation of your new cage. He finishes speaking of convoys and falls silent, and you stare at the map between you, the lines of the Nile Delta blurred by the flickering lamplight into the veins of a captured beast, and you feel the cold weight of your signet ring pressing into your palm. The gold, now a seal for promises that will drain your granaries for a generation. You look from the map to his face, which shows no triumph, only the cool satisfaction of a problem solved, and you understand that you have not won a throne, but negotiated a surrender, and the terms are forever. He rolls up the map, the gesture final, and he tells you the hour is late and that you should rest, because dawn will come, and with it, the performance you must both give to a city that has just been conquered without a sword being drawn. You nod, because there is nothing else to say, and you turn to leave the room where you arrived in a carpet, your hand closing around the door's bronze handle, which is cold and solid like the new truth of your life. You step into the corridor, the door clicking shut behind you, and the palace air smells the same, salt and incense and old stone. But it is all different now, because you walk these halls not as a fugitive, but as a client queen, the heavy signet ring cold on your finger. Your footsteps echo in the empty dark as you move toward the rooms that were once your own, and from a distant courtyard you hear the sharp, rhythmic tread of a Roman sentry where your brother's guards once stood.